And now we're going to look more specifically at the data and what we know about the data in Orange County. Okay, so there's two sets of data we're going to look at. The first is the point-in-time count, and the second is system performance measures. So the point-in-time count is like super fresh because we just did it last week. But this is data from 2016, right? So this is data. We're still actually collecting data for the 2017 point-in-time count because you look at one particular night, which for us was last Wednesday, January 25th. But you can ask folks for up to a week after, and we're hoping the service providers are doing that, where did you sleep on Wednesday, January 25th? So that's continuing to go on, and then we'll get information from the HMIS, from the database, from all the folks that were in emergency shelter and transitional housing programs about where they slept. Yada, yada, going too long on that. But anyway, that's fresh, and that's like a snapshot, right? So who was homeless, experiencing homelessness on this one particular night. The system performance measures are outcomes. So those are those outcomes we've been talking about. So how long are people staying homeless in our system? How many people are newly homeless? What's the total number of people experiencing homelessness over the course of the year? How many people are returning to homelessness after exiting? How many people are exiting to permanent housing from the various different programs? That kind of stuff. So that's exciting. 2016 was a baseline year for the system performance measures. So we'll have a baseline to see where we're going up or down in our system going through it. So I think a lot of times when you hear people talk about point in time count, the next thing you're going to hear is like this long stream of like grumbling, right? There's a lot of grumbling about point in time count. It's not accurate. It's not right. You're not counting everyone. I don't know any community, no matter how long they've been doing it or how many folks are involved. There's like, what's 100% accurate and we feel like great about, there's no question or quibble or whatnot, is the point in time count. It's just, there's always room for improvement, I think, and always room. And that's sort of known. And yet, HUD continues to, in fact, I would say, double, triple, quadruple down on the point in time count. I think for a lot of years, people are like, HUD's going to get rid of this any minute. But it has not happened. And in fact, they base now funding on the point in time count. And now they're basing, it's like more and more and more and more. So I think it's here with us. It's something to stay. It's a great way to get involved, or I hope it is at any rate. Jerry participated. What did you think, Jerry?
Specifically the individual. I was just impressed with how well versed they were on individuals and what the issues were with that individual. They could have done something for us based on what they've seen below within a snapshot.
Yeah. Okay, good. So we do ask community volunteers to come out and do it, and I think in Carborough, they've really got a great relationship. And then not to say other folks don't, but in other communities, they've found, to have community volunteers to do the actual surveys, because it's not just sort of a tick, HUD doesn't do ticks, right? So it's like a long survey. It takes about 10 minutes to do with someone of with demographic information and whatnot. And we found have sort of neutral party do, that surveying. It's, can be helpful for the individual sometimes. Also, I think, it's great for folks Jerry's been involved with the leadership team, so this is not like a new thing, but we had other folks who was like, the point in time count was the first sort of thing that they were doing in the community, and it's a interesting way to like have a peek into what's going on and whatnot. So, all that to say. Yeah. Awesome. Yeah. So it happens every year. If you'd like to get involved, we'd love to have you. There's some folks that are interested in doing sort of these long ongoing commitments, and other folks that are like, could I just like one night is what I can do, and we'd love to have you. So that's, again, it's usually the last Wednesday in January. So, it just happened, but it's every year if you're interested. Okay. So what do we know about, what we saw last year? First of all, our overall numbers last year were low. So we counted 80 total people experiencing homelessness, and of those, 15 unsheltered. Overwhelmingly, the population is folks who are single adults, right? So not that many folks in families. Only 12% of people were in families. 88% of the folks were single adults, no kids in their household at that point. Most of the folks also were adults over 25. So HUD looks at age in 3 different categories. There's children who are 17 and younger, youth who are 18 to 24, and then 25 and older are adults. So overwhelmingly, our folks are adults, 87% adults. And then mostly male, 75% male, 74%, 26% female. And then HUD also asks about transgender, if folks identify as transgender. And then there's a new category added this year is like don't identify as male, female, or transgender. So folks can self-identify in a lot of different ways. So we had 74% male, 26% female last year, no transgender. Overall, and this is another reason why it can be helpful to look at point-in-time count data, because, there are these flaws with it. No one necessarily feels like it's like 100% accurate. There's some agita around all of it, but we've been doing it a long time, so we can at least look at trends, and maybe some of those things would be sort of the same year to year. So overall, our number was quite a bit down in 2016. It looks to be a bit up in 2017 from what we're seeing so far. But, the 2016 was the lowest on record. So what you're seeing there, the dark number is the folks that were, sheltered. So in shelter or transitional housing programs. And then that lighter number is people living unsheltered. So that was 15 for us last year. The numbers were down based on all the different subpopulations that we look at. So HUD asked us to look at the number of people experiencing chronic homelessness. So those are folks homeless for a long time or many episodes over a long time, also who have a disability, chronic homeless, and then veterans, and then families as well. The numbers were down in all those categories. So last year, there wasn't a lot of confidence, and maybe you noticed that we didn't throw a parade, et cetera. We weren't saying we've done it, we've ended homelessness. There was not a lot of confidence that we had 100% surety that this meant that we were really housing all these folks and no one was, uncounted, et cetera, et cetera. So we weren't sure if maybe there were folks living in Orange County experiencing homelessness that we were not able to find for whatever reason and didn't count, or if there were folks who were homeless in Orange County the year before and then went to Durham or Alamance, but are still homeless, right? Or if it meant what we hope that it means, which is in what we're trying to do around here, which is that folks were homeless and then now they're housed, right? So that's what we're hoping for, but there was not 100% confidence, and that's what those numbers meant last year. We do know that there's a lot of great work happening. There's a lot of folks that have been doing this point-in-time count for years and years and years, including law enforcement folks and many others who are just fantastic. And then the service providers as well. We've got these really progressive things happening in our community. So that's not to say that we, not quite sure about the numbers and just not sure about anything. There is a lot of great work and a lot of really progressive work happening. But we'll hope to have a little more information when we get the data in from this year and see what all that meant from last year and try to draw some more concrete conclusions going forward. Yeah, Chelsea. Yeah. So we talk with our colleagues statewide, Durham, and then Chatham and Alamance. So especially with Durham, we find that folks are sort of going back and forth across the county line for services, and that county line is super arbitrary, and there's some campsites, in fact, that straddle the county line. So I'm working with the folks in Durham now to make sure we're not double counting folks for the 2017 point in time count, for example. But then beyond that, for coordination, we are looking at, because again, we have like our by name list, they have their by name list, to try to understand that, and hopefully at some point, share data and share a database with that HMIS system that we can have kind of, sharing and whatnot. That's what we're going towards and wanting to do. But also to be able to coordinate like more, because this is happening, but it's not like formalized of like, well, there's no room in the shelter here, people are going to urban ministries, but like, can we make that like easier and a more transparent process for everyone involved? And same thing with like, Allied Churches in Alamance County and the domestic violence shelter in Chatham, to just formalize that these things that are already happening, but make it easier for the person, that they're not having to call and whatnot. Maybe that we're doing that, and that path is like a little smoother. Yeah. Thanks. Okay, so the last bit of gristle for us to chew are the system performance measures. So these are the outcome measures, right? That we're looking at the big picture stuff. So this is 2016 was the first time that we reported those. So looking, starting sort of at the beginning of the process for the number of folks that were newly homeless, this records over a 12-month period, right? So, and the 12-month period is on the federal fiscal year. So let me see if I can wrap my brain around what they were. It was October 2014 to September 2015. I believe that's right. So it's a little bit ago as well. So the HUD asked us to break out the number of people newly homeless, so they have no other records in that database, for emergency shelter and transitional housing, and then also adding in for the permanent housing programs, how many folks presented for services during that 12-month period. So it was 210 for shelter and transitional housing, and then adding in the permanent housing, 235, with folks that had no records for going 2 years back in the database. Looking at the average length of time homeless, HUD asked you to look at that just for shelter, and then to add in transitional housing with the shelter. So we've had some changes in our system from the time that this data is looking at. So I think our numbers will look a little, different in coming years for some of this. But the total number of people that were in emergency shelter programs, 255, 333 adding in folks in transitional housing programs. And then they look at it in the number of days. So the average number of time people stayed in shelter, 109 days. But we had some really big outliers there. So if you take the median instead of the mean, instead of the average, it was 50 days. So those big outliers were really pulling up the average quite a bit, you can see. And then if you add in the transitional housing programs, average days 121, and then the median, though, again, accounting for those outliers, was 62 days. So that's actually, pretty good. As far as how long we want people to be homeless for as short amount of time as possible. And of course, we're not, resting on our laurels with that. We want it to be even shorter, but it's definitely better than a lot of other systems in the state. So that's great. Then we also looked at how many people are exiting successfully to permanent housing. That's the goal, right? To get folks into permanent housing. Do it in a quick way. So at this time of this data, we had a street outreach program, and 21% of folks were exiting right from the street to permanent housing, which again, that's pretty good for street outreach for that type of program. For shelter and transitional housing, 38% exiting directly from those programs to permanent housing. And then for permanent supportive housing, that is already a permanent housing program, so people can't exit from there because they're already housed or counted as housed in permanent supportive housing. But how many people are retaining that housing? And that was like 99%, so that's great. That's what we want to see. HUD also asked us to look at income, and there are two different income measures that are part of those outcomes. So first, it's like employment and non-employment cash income, and how many people are increasing income. So they look at folks that are staying in programs, and then folks that exited, so stayers and leavers. So these are a bit the hardest nuts to crack nationwide for like the income piece, getting that going. So only 15% of folks increased income who are in programs. So Some of that is like not recording things in the database and things like that. So there's some data quality that we can improve there, but also some work to do. And then this is the returns, right? So how many people are exiting to permanent housing and then returning? And it's broken out by program. But overall, what we're finding is 22% of folks are exiting to permanent housing and then returning to homelessness based on the information in the database. So again, we want that as low as possible. It is going to be some amount, probably. It's unlikely that it'll be zero, but as close to zero as possible is what we are going for. Okay, so a lot of times people are asking, where do I find help? If I need to find help, we are going again to that butterfly Shangri-La system where we'll have quite a easy, well-worn path of how folks get to services. For now, we do have a resource list that's on our website that you can print out. You can sit on your desk if that's helpful for you. Or we also have a database that you can search for all different types of services, including housing and job stuff and all kinds of different stuff that's updated regularly, called OC Connect. And so you can search in that way too if you're looking for resources for someone. We really need your help. We need everyone's help. And there's a lot of different roles that folks can play. We appreciate you continuing your engagement. We've got Facebook and Twitter and our website now as well, where we try to post a lot of information. So please visit those places often. It's really helpful for folks to just like retweet things or share Facebook posts. That alone is like really helpful and potentially an easy thing to do, and appreciate you doing that. The point in time count also, again, that's an annual thing. We also have folks involved in like the systems level. If that's if you've got like a macro brain and you'd rather work at that level than like direct service, we've got a lot of work that needs to happen in that area in the next year, and would appreciate any help with that. It's also really helpful. I don't find anywhere, and also in Orange County, that there's like a good base level understanding of sort of where we are with homeless services. And when I came to the field as well, my thought was like shelters, right? So that's what homeless services are, shelters. And there's so much more beyond shelters. Shelters are important. We love our shelters. Thank you, IFC, for being so great. But there's also all this other stuff happening, and really appreciate you guys kind of, at your cocktail parties and the whatnots, leisure time activities, if you're talking with folks, to just educate other folks about that as well. That is really helpful.